Welcome, guys, to another episode of Dirt and Grip. We're here interviewing the arm bender. Fellas, take us all the way back to the beginning. What got you involved in pulling with semis and then into hot semis in the first place?
Well, do you want me to start with the semis, or do you want me to start with stuff that I pulled before that?
Go all the way back. What
Okay.
got your feet wet?
All right. Well, as a kid, I was always at the fairs and stuff because we took animals there and was in 4-H and so on and so forth. And of course, at the fairs, they always have pulls and stuff. So when we wasn't up with the animals and stuff, I would always sort of sneak down and watch the pulls and stuff down there, and just really was intrigued and got into it then. So I've just always, as a kid, just went to truck and tractor pulls, and just always enjoyed it. And then down at Perrysville, where I lived down below Carrollton, they had a pull down there, and they had it for two-wheel drive pickups and then also farm tractors. And it was just a dead weight pull. So I started out pulling there, took my two-wheel drive pickup and ended up winning with it there.
Nice.
Basically, everybody had fancy weights and all this stuff, and I was a farmer and stuff, I just loaded the back end with feed, and we went screaming down through there, and it was pretty decent. So that was, getting my feet wet. That's where I started out, and I pulled a few of the farm tractors and stuff like that.
Okay.
And then when I was at a pull at the fair, and I'm not even sure what year that was, but it was back in the 80s, somewhere in the 80s. They had a stock semi pulling class, and being that I had a semi for my business and stuff, so I think I was actually 1990 was when that happened. Being I had a semi, I thought, I can do that. So the next year, I painted my truck all up and all that stuff, and then they didn't even end up having it that year at the Carrollton Fair. So then I saw the next year they had them at Caddis, so then I started going to the ones down there and enjoyed it real well, and started going to a few other ones, and so I pulled stock semis for quite a few years and always enjoyed it and stuff. And then all of a sudden I started seeing some of the hot trucks and stuff, and I thought, wow, I could do something like that too. So one thing led to another, and ended up finding one that was already together almost, but not quite. We had to do, put the transmission in it and some things like that. And that was Arm Bender 1, so that was my first hot semi.
Okay.
I did have another one I was working on before that, but we never did get it put back together and stuff, so it's actually still in pieces. But Arm Bender 1 was the first one that we competed with, and it's on the back of the trailer back here. And I ran that for several years, and then Leah here, she decided that she had a little bit of interest in it. And John Mann, he had Lady Butterfly that he'd actually been contacting me several different years, for a few years, trying to sell it to me, but it was a little bit more money than I was wanting to pay and stuff. So anyways, he kept coming down in price every time he'd call me, so the price finally got to where it was halfway affordable. So, and since he was sort of interested, we went up and looked at it and ended up buying that. So that was the second one that I had.
That's Madam Butterfly?
Yeah, Lady Butterfly. Yeah.
Okay.
And so then we was pulling with the LSTPA because they always had the most pulls around, for doing it. They always seemed to be the best thing going with the semis and stuff. So we was pulling with them and stuff. And then, but we was always the underdog because we was running the V12 Detroits, and those used to be the happening motors to have, but it just got to where they weren't competitive anymore, and that's what we had. So we was always the underdog, but we still went and enjoyed it and all that kind of stuff. But I was always looking for either putting a cat motor in one of the ones that we had, or looking for another truck that had a cat in it. And then that's when Senseless came up for sale. And I renamed it, and that was Arm Bender 2, so that's the blue one.
Gotcha.
And so then we was running 3 of them, and that was kind of fun too for quite a while. And then suddenly, and I mean this is several years apart. This wasn't all within a year or two.
Right.
Then all of a sudden, the Twisted Kitty came up for sale. And I wasn't really interested in it. I mean, I already had my hands full with 3 trucks, so I really didn't need another one and stuff. But, it kept popping up in my news feed and this, that, and the other. And then I decided, well, another reason I don't need it because it's green, and I'm not really into the green stuff. So But anyways, I kept talking myself out of it, but I finally ended up calling him up and talked to him about it, and then I did go ahead and decide to buy it, and it's definitely been a strong running truck.
Okay.
And then after that, Mike Larrabee sold Shameless, and well, actually that was a little bit before that he sold Shameless, before I had gotten the Twisted Kitty, but anyways, he sold Shameless, and then the person that had bought it decided that they weren't going to go ahead and continue to fix it back up. You know, he had sold the motor separate and stuff, so it needed a motor and stuff. And Brian Lowry, he was the one that bought it, and he's into racing semis. And he decided that he wasn't going to go the direction he thought pulling, so then it was up for sale over in Pennsylvania where I get some motors built. And so I ended up buying it then, and it's still in the making, you know, getting converted over to a Cat instead of a Cummins. So.
Okay.
So that's pretty much it on that there. So I know you didn't realize this was going to be so long and drawn out.
That's all right. It's all right. It's really interesting hearing the history of one of the more prolific pullers in the area. You mentioned a little more technical question. You had mentioned something about the engines. You had the V12 Detroit. You said it used to be the happening engine, and then it just didn't get competitive. What happened that made it no longer a competitive option?
Well, it isn't that they lost any power, because they're still just as powerful as what they was, but it's just that people learned how to get more power out of some of the other ones, because those are an old two-stroke, and you know, it just you're able to get more power out of the other ones. They got a longer stroke on the Cats and the Cummins.
Okay.
And Cummins is the next one that came up, stepped up, that was actually winning all the time. But now it's pretty much the Cats pretty much overpower the Cummins now for the most part. So, you know, just as things progress and they learn more things and do more testing and different stuff, and people come up with different products to put on them and stuff, then, you know, that's what makes the difference.
Now, you've been around the sport for a while, so tell me, what's one of the things that's changed in the sport that has been for the better over the years, like from where you started to where it is now?
Well, there's definitely a lot more coverage now of the sport than what there used to be. You know, it used to be you'd have a few people with cameras, this, that, and the other, but I mean, it's definitely a lot more coverage with it, and a lot more people filming it and getting it on the internet and stuff like that. So, and
then obviously, then there's the tails of that question. What's one of the things that's changed that just that specific change should immediately go away today, right now?
Okay, with the semis?
Semis, pulling in general, with the circuits that you usually run.
Well, I mean, as far as in our class, I don't like the way that they changed how they're measuring the hitches now. You know? So that's, I mean, basically, I guess everybody has to do it that way. But if your truck's a different length and stuff, it just sort of puts some people at a disadvantage that way.
Gotcha.
You know, and the way our trucks are set up, the Armbender 2 isn't set up that way, but the rest of them, we've got the nose a lot closer to the ground. You know, we sort of rake the front end. And with the front end being raked, the way that they're wanting to measure the hitches is going to actually work against us. So we'd have to make some changes on our trucks to be competitive the way that they want to do it.
Because the overall length of truck is what they're considering?
Well, it isn't really. I mean, actually, just the way that they measure it. It used to be, for the last 25 years, you measured your hitches whenever your suspension was all the way down in the hot class.
And now they do it all the way up?
Now they're wanting to do it with the suspension all the way up.
Okay.
And being that our front end's already raked, that's going to just make that's going to make it where we're going to have to lower our hitches a lot more than what the person that doesn't have a low front end is going to have to, you know, to be starting out.
Did you know why they changed that to go from lower to higher? Was there a specific reason?
Well, there's been some crying and belly aching for the last couple years as far as how they was going to do it and how they was going to do the suspension and stuff. And, you know, the guy that's actually was pushing it the hardest and made most of the phone calls isn't even pulling. But, well, he's not pulling semis. I guess now he's pulling, he's been pulling some pickups and stuff, but he doesn't even have his own truck. He's just always pulling somebody else's like he used to with the semis. But anyways, he's the one that's been calling around and got most of the people swayed to see it his way. So, you know, it's one of them things where somebody that header knows where it didn't belong is what it amounts to.
Right. That happens everywhere you go. Unfortunately, it happened in your class. Now, for someone who's never ever watched a hot semi class before, what makes it different from a basic stock semi pull? Basically, is there differences in how you control it? Obviously, power you're putting out is going to be different. Is the weight different?
They pretty much are. Most of them are about the same weight as far as the weight of the truck. 20,000 pounds is what most of them are.
Okay.
And there's a few of the ones though in the stock trucks that went to a 22,000 pound class, but I'm not sure which ones still are and which ones aren't.
Right.
Just for the fact that some of the working trucks, if you got a wet line and a sleeper on it and stuff, they are a heavier truck. So, as far as difference in controlling it, yeah, there's just a lot of difference of how you control it and stuff. For one thing, with the hot semis, you have to sit there and try to spool it up coming out of the hole, make sure that your boost is up and all this stuff, where with your stock trucks, normally you're trying to keep it up the best you can, but they spool up a lot easier,
Okay.
Smaller motors spool
Right.
up a lot easier. So on the takeoffs easier, controlling them's a lot easier, because a lot of times, sometimes both of our front wheels will bounce up off the ground and you don't have any steering, where with the stock trucks, we never really had that problem. We could steer them fine. I mean, it's just, you're playing with your suspension and just doing a lot of other things. There's just a lot of difference in the hot versus your stock.
Now, I know in tractors you can control the wheels with your wheel speed. Are you able to do that with the you able to set up with the trucks
No,
as
because
well,
no, in your hot class, your axles are all pretty much locked together.
Okay.
So basically, that's another reason it's harder to steer them, because you've got posi.
Right.
So
Right.
it makes it a lot harder to steer.
Gotcha. So you gotta aim where you're gonna go and keep it on that line.
Pretty much. I mean, you can still turn them as long as your front end isn't getting too light, but it's a lot rougher.
Yeah. Yeah. It's really interesting. Now, the weight that you're pulling itself, does it differ between the basic semi to the hot semi?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not even sure what weight they're even using now on the standards, but I mean, it's definitely way heavier. In fact, we're probably pulling about twice as much weight as what they use with the stock trucks, depending on which stock trucks they're pulling, because there's some of the stock ones that are fairly hot, and the sled operator can pretty much gauges it,
Gotcha.
what he sees there that night for how much weight he puts on.
All right. So it's just his job is to hinder you guys enough so you don't pull all the way off the track,
Right.
So everyone gets a fair pull.
Right.
Gotcha.
Yeah,
Fair
and
enough.
I mean, and that's gonna in the stock trucks, that's just gonna vary, just depending on how hot they actually are, because of course even the guys with the stock, they're trying to boost it up as much as they can, get as much power as what they can. But
For people who don't know, in the hot semi class, are there any rules on specifically like how you're supposed to you build your truck, what you're allowed to, not allowed to do? That would kind of surprise someone. It would seem rather like a small detail, but it's kind of surprising that this is something that has to be done this way.
There's just a lot of different rules and regulations. I mean,
Right.
we're only allowed certain size tires.
Okay.
Like an 11R 24/5 is the biggest tire we're allowed to use. We can use something smaller, but we can't go any bigger than that, and we can only go so wide with them also.
Okay.
So because a lot of people were actually using that 11 24/5 casing, but putting a wider tread on it, and you can only go, so wide now. So
Yeah, you can only do that, get away with that once until people start measuring your tire and be like, hey, wait a minute.
Yeah, actually they have a special tool that they put on there, and it slides on both sides of the tire, and if it won't slide on, then that means it's wider than what it's intended to be.
Gotcha.
So that way you're not arguing with a tape measure and stuff. They can just slide that right on there, and either it goes on or it doesn't.
Right.
So. But yeah, there's just a lot of different rules and regulations, and OSTPA only allows the one turbo with the hot trucks, and if you have more than one turbo, then they're going to lower your hitch 2 inches.
Okay.
And there's really just a lot of other things. I mean, you got to have to start out with the stock block,
Okay.
and no billet heads, and
Oh, really? Okay.
But you are allowed as big a turbo at this time. You're allowed as big a turbo as you want, where a lot of the other tractor classes and stuff, they limit the size turbo, and there's no limit on the hot trucks at this time, but they were talking about trying to do something like that too, so we'll see where that goes.
Hopefully not, because it makes it more fun. People can do what they want.
Yeah.
Now, if someone's coming to you tomorrow and be like, hey, I want to build a hot semi truck, you're obviously, everyone needs lots of money to build these trucks. They're quite expensive. But what's one of the first things, absent the money, that you would tell them this is what you need to do in order to be ready to start building your truck?
Well, personally, I would recommend somebody start pulling stock first.
Okay.
And not only with the semis, I would say the same thing with tractors, that you really want to get your feet wet and start out stock.
Gotcha.
In stock class, and do it a few years, see how well you like it, and then start building up from there.
Mm-hmm.
Because I mean, definitely a whole different experience, when you get into the hot. And if you're not ready for it, it's, even coming off the line, when to let the clutch out, how many RPMs to spool it up to, it's just,
right.
So somebody that's got some pulling experience can transition into it fairly decent, but somebody that doesn't,
have some rough times.
Or I guess if you started out with an automatic like she did, then then it wouldn't be quite as bad. But I mean, if you're starting out with a standard, because the automatics aren't going to be as competitive, but if you start out with a standard, you probably should be pulling stock to start with.
Right.
But
okay. That's fair enough. Now, what series are you going to be competing in this year? I know there was some talk you're not doing OSTPA this year. Is there? Have you narrowed it down?
Haven't really decided yet what we're going to do this year.
Gotcha.
In fact, I mean, the OSTPA is not 100% out, but I'm not don't have things quite set up for the changes and stuff yet. So, I'm not 100% sure on that yet.
Hopefully we'll see out there.
And it's coming up pretty quick. I think July 4th is their first pull for the OSTPA as far as with the semis.
Oh, it's coming up pretty quick.
Yeah, and if I'd have had Shameless ready, then we probably would have went ahead and did it. But since it's not quite going to be ready, then because we wanted to sort of, actually a pull we went to 2 weeks ago, we wanted to have Shameless ready by that one for a test pull, and that didn't happen. So, it's looking like we might not be hitting near as many this year as what we normally have.
Now, if you do you normally pull for points or you go for wins? What do you?
I normally pull for points.
Pull for points. Okay.
Now, last year I didn't know. Last year I just showed up about halfway through the season and then just went to just a few hit and miss ones that I like to go to.
Okay.
And actually it takes a lot less stress off of you if you're not running for points.
That's fair enough.
Just go to the ones that you enjoy going to and go from there. So.
Yeah. Now you mentioned that one of the tracks in the area you hook up usually better. Is there a difference in that track from what to other tracks and how it's made or how it's set up, or is it just?
I'm not sure if it's just lucky. That was up at Dragway 42, and the last 3 times that I pulled up there, the Twisted Kitty won first place. And actually the track, the last time I pulled didn't seem quite as good as sometimes. But it wasn't real bad. You just had to read the track, and then I sort of was just picking the spots where I knew was decent to go down through. So, instead of being able to do a straight shot, I just sort of had to do a little bit of zigzag, and then I almost was out of bounds. In fact, that pull was the closest I've ever been in my life to being out of bounds.
Oh, really?
In fact, I mean, it was just like a quarter of an inch away from that line.
Tiptoeing the line?
I was sticking my head out the window watching the line, and I was going to get off of it because I thought I was going to go out of bounds, but then I decided, well, if I leave off of it, I'm not going to win. So if I go out of bounds, I'm not going to win. Just keep it hammered, see what happens. And it worked out. So.
Now, you got into pulling. When did you get into pulling? What interests you specifically into getting? It's not a real female-dominated sport.
Right. I guess just watching my dad do it my whole life. I'd always go to fairs and stuff with him, and my sister and I would be rooting him on in the crowd. I specifically remember one time, and I don't know if he knows this, so he's gonna know it now. You're not supposed to have anybody in the bed of the sleeper of this when he was pulling the stock, and me and my sister snuck in there. And then ever since then, it was just a rush, so I knew that it would be fun. And then he had said something about the lady butterfly and really piqued my interest. And he was like, now, if we get this, you're not going to be afraid of it, right? Like, it's not going to be like a one-time thing. I was like, no, I think I like it. I did it the one time and fell in love. And
nice.
That's what got me going.
Nice. It's really nice seeing a family being a part of it. We really like families to get back involved in this. And yeah, it's nice to have that real competitive nature, but start of the day, this was a family sport. Started as a family thing. Just having fun and doing ridiculous things with farm equipment because it was fun. So try to get that back into to where it started at. Well, I want to thank you guys for setting up.
All right. Well, thanks a lot for coming down.
It's good talking to you, Gene. Good talking to you as well.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Good to talk to you.
Good to talk to you as well. Thank you, guys. That was our interview with Gene Dunn and his trucks. Now, I realize everyone asks you for this, but please like, subscribe to the channel. It's the best way you can help us get our numbers up and reach more people and get this awesome sport out to others that'd be really interested. Thank you.